This is the card we're going to do today. This is from the Hero Arts April 2019 kit. And this card opens to reveal a pop-up. And so let's begin. I'm taking a sheet of Neenah Desert Storm cardstock and cutting it down the middle and then scoring it at 5.5 inches. Next, I'll take the building dies from the kit and I will cut them from some black cardstock. And here I'm going to take some heavyweight cardstock and cut the same dies again. Now I am going to glue the two pieces of each piece that I cut out together to make one sturdier piece. And here I'm starting my preliminary positioning of everything. And here I'm positioning and cutting out the pop-up dies in order to get the pop-up feature for the card. And here I'm cutting out some small pieces of cardstock to re-support those pop-ups. And here I'm doing some more positioning. Now I'm going to cut out the water portion, the water die from black cardstock. At first I tried to use my little sidekick die cutter, but this die is too intricate for that. And next I'll try using my big shot using the precision plate. And that also is not doing a very good job, so I'll try and even put a piece of paper in to shim it up a little more. But the big shot isn't even able to cut this die for me. So I've decided now that I'm going to use my Gemini Junior to cut this. And it did a perfect cut first time. And so now I'm going to glue the black water die cut onto some light blue cardstock and then trim it down to the size that I want. And now I am cutting notches into that water die cut so it can fit over the pop-up feature in the card. And here I've decided I wanted a wider pop-up in the middle, so I am cutting over the original pop-up. And then I'm also going to cut little pieces of paper to help support that middle pop-up. And now I'm going to trim 1/2 inch off the top and bottom of that pop-up panel. Now I'm going to use some Memento gray flannel and a cloud stencil that I made from some cloud border dies to add some clouds to the sky portion of the pop-up. Now I'm going to cut an outline of this building out of white cardstock so that I can glue it behind the building and have white windows shining out of it. And now I'm using some 1mm foam tape to pop up this building on the sky portion of the pop-up panel. And now I'm gluing the water die cut onto that center pop-up. And now I'll use some more Memento gray flannel to add some color to some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. And then I'll trace this out for the background of the two side buildings. And here I'm using 2mm foam tape to put the little bridge onto the back panel on front of that building. And now I'll glue the gondolier to the top of the water die cut. And now I'll cut the two side buildings out of white cardstock so that I can glue the window portion of those die cuts into the spaces on the black die cuts that I've originally done. And now the two side buildings are ready to be glued into the pop-up panel. And now I'm going to use a Lawn Fawn Grassy border die to cut some black cardstock so that I can put some grass along the front between the two. And here I'm using 2mm foam tape so that when I put the grass on, it will be slightly raised from the buildings. And here I'm using my Memento marker to hide some of that white foam tape. And now I'll use some Versafine ink to stamp the birds. And now I'll use some Memento gray flannel to color in some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and I'll stamp and cut out a sentiment. And here I'll add some more of the gray flannel ink to make a frame for that sentiment die cut. And I've taken some black fun foam and I have cut that main building die to make a stamp. And I'm using some temporary adhesive to place the fun foam stamp into my stamping positioner, and then I'll use some Versafine black Onyx ink to stamp onto some light blue cardstock. And now I'll take a piece of craft cardstock and cut it vertically at 4 3/4 of an inch to give me a top folding card that is going to be 4 3/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And now I'll trim down this stamped image to fit on the front of the card base. And now I'll use my cloud stencil and the gray flannel ink to create some clouds on this stamped panel. And I'll add some more gray flannel to the bottom of the image and glue it to the top of the card base and stamp the sentiment. And I managed to smudge a fingerprint, and so I will stamp a bird to try and hide that, and I'll also add some more clouds. And now I'll use some double-sided tape to add the pop-up panel to our card base. And on the envelope flap, I will stamp that stamp that kind of looks like a canceled stamp. And here's the final card. This is the front of the card. And when you open it, it reveals the pop-up feature. So it's a simple front and open to reveal the pop-up. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye!